What's up guys, my name is Ace, and a few days ago on Reddit, I saw a really interesting post about how often people are using perks within Warzone as well as multiplayer. And with this, we got this image here, which shows the exact percentage of how much each of these perks are used. Now, of course, I will leave a link to the original Reddit post in the description down below, but today, now that we have this information, I wanted to provide some feedback on how I feel some of these perks could be improved in order to spur a bit more variety with the perks. Because you might notice pretty quickly, there isn't a lot of variety of perk usage here. Now, a few things to clarify before we get into this. I am going to be focusing on Warzone, and this is for a couple reasons. First up, I'm not really into multiplayer at this point. I really don't like multiplayer that much this year, so I mainly just play Warzone. But another thing is I've completely given up on even trying to give suggestions for how to improve multiplayer for Modern Warfare, because I feel like it's just falling on deaf ears, and at this point in the game's life cycle especially, I don't anticipate we'll be seeing any major changes whatsoever here. With Warzone, on the other hand, I feel like maybe there's still some hope here because they actually are showing a lot of love to Warzone and still making relatively big changes to improve the gameplay experience. Additionally, I wanted to mention that I am fully aware that there will never be perfect perk balance, and even with the suggestions I provide here, that's not going to level out the perks completely, so there's an equal distribution of perks. The goal behind this is more so what I would do to at least improve variety of perks a little bit more and make some perks that really aren't used at all, make them possibly worthwhile to use for at least some playstyles out there. So with those in mind, let's hop into it and start going through the tier 1 perks. Now the first thing you'll notice here is EOD is by far the most used tier 1 perk at 60%. And the least used perk is Scavenger at just 0.6%. And that's not a surprise. There's really not much reason to use Scavenger in Warzone because enemies are going to be dropping their ammo anyway when you kill them, so you don't need that Scavenger pack on top of that. So let's actually start it off with my recommendations for Scavenger. What I would personally do to Scavenger, and I think I have mentioned this in the past as well, is I would make it so any enemy that you kill is guaranteed to drop 1 extra armor plate. Now, in Season 5, all enemies drop at least 1 armor plate every time they die, even if they didn't have an armor plate in their inventory, which I think is great. So I would say with Scavenger, just add 1 armor plate on top of whatever you would have gotten from that enemy player. That wouldn't suddenly make Scavenger overpowered, and honestly, it wouldn't give you a massive uptick in usage for Scavenger, but at least it would give some reason to use it. I think some people might be attracted to that, being able to get that extra plate every time they get a kill, and maybe people would use it a bit more often than 0.6%. Now, as for Double Time and Cold Blooded, we actually see really solid usage here at 17 and 19% respectively, and EOD I think is perfectly fine as it is right now as well. So this just leaves us with Kill Chain and Quick Fix. Now, Kill Chain is used a bit more than Quick Fix, but it's still only at 1.4%, which is extremely low. And I really thought a lot about this perk and what could be done to it that sort of fits with the theme of that perk, which as it is right now, it gives you higher odds of getting kill streaks out of those loot crates that are around the map. And with this one, I think a simple thing they could do to it that would make it much more attractive is just significantly increase the odds that not only are you going to get a kill streak, but also that kill streak is going to be a higher rarity level. So lower odds of getting a shield turret, for instance, and much better odds of getting something like a cluster strike, a UAV, or a precision airstrike. Especially if the odds for the UAV was bumped up a little bit, I think that would really bump up the usage of Kill Chain quite a bit. And that just leaves us with Quick Fix, which is just behind Scavenger at just 0.7% usage, which is extremely low. And this is for a pretty good reason as well for Warzone. When you're killing somebody, that fight is typically over, and plus it only triggers the regeneration of your health, and armor is really what tends to count in a gunfight. So Quick Fix doesn't really help in too many situations. I guess sometimes if you're in a 1v2, it might make the difference between life and death, but even then, most of the time, you're not going to be able to come out on top in that 1v2 fight. So the suggestion I have for Quick Fix, going along with the idea of being able to heal up faster after a fight, or just being able to heal up faster in general, is I would actually like to see it give about a 15% boost to the speed at which you're able to put plates on. And I think 15% would be a reasonable number where it would give you a nice, noticeable boost. It would be a very worthwhile perk for people that like to be aggressive, but it wouldn't become immediately overpowered or a crutch. And just to show you guys here, this is what it looks like now, putting 3 armor plates on and how long it takes. And you can see that it really takes you out of the fight for a good amount of time. Now I want to show you guys what it would look like being 15% faster. And as you can see, it's very noticeably faster and it would be a nice boost. But at the same time, it's not instant. It's still going to take you out of the fight for a while. It's not like it would be completely overpowered at that point. It would just be a really solid boost, and I think that would be awesome, and that's a perk I would love to run. So yeah, that's pretty much it for tier 1. I think the tier 1 perks are actually in the best spot out of all 3 tiers of perks. Now let's move into tier 2, which is the most complex tier of perks in my opinion, and this is for a couple reasons. Well, first up, we can see that overkill is the most used at 74%, which was a bit surprising to me because I know a lot of people really like using Ghost as well, which is at 22%, but then I remembered most people, myself included, we tend to start with an overkill class so we can get 2 weapons that are fully kitted out exactly how we like them. And then for our second loadout, that's when we'll swap over to the Ghost perk, and then we can just pick up our 2 overkill guns that we had from the previous class after that. So I think that's why we're seeing such a massive amount of people using overkill, and honestly, I don't see how that could change. I don't think overkill could be nerfed in any way, especially because any nerf to overkill in Warzone would affect your classes directly, which carry over to multiplayer, which means you'd have to nerf it in multiplayer as well, and then things just start getting way too complex there. So unfortunately, I've got to say, I just wouldn't touch overkill just because it would be overly complex. So let's get into some of the other perks. I think Ghost is a bit of a crutch when it comes to later game situations especially. And instead of nerfing Ghost directly, like making it only work while moving or something, that doesn't really work well for a battle royale. Instead, what I would do as an indirect nerf to Ghost is I would nerf the heartbeat sensor. I would make it so you have like a battery level on the heartbeat sensor, and every time you look at that heartbeat sensor, it depletes the battery slightly. Then it would actually be more in line with other equipment in the game where it can actually run out, or like if you use it enough, it will disappear and you have to find another one to replace that, or maybe use Restock, maybe have that work on that. This would have an awesome effect on Ghost usage, I feel, and it would really make people feel less reliant on the Ghost perk. At least for me, I know I would feel less reliant on the Ghost perk. Yes, people can still get UAVs, but those aren't nearly as annoying to deal with as somebody with a heartbeat sensor, which is why I always use a heartbeat sensor. So I think that's something that could be done to Ghost that would reduce reliance on that a little bit. Next up with Restock. Restock is only at 2.6%, which is quite low, and therefore what I would do to Restock is just give it a simple time buff. As it is now, you replenish a piece of equipment every 50 seconds, which is way slower than multiplayer. I wouldn't mind seeing what that's like at 40 seconds. So it's still going to take you quite a long time to replenish one. It's not like you're going to be constantly spamming out those stun grenades over and over in the same fight. It's just going to get you your equipment back a little bit faster than it was before. I think that would bump up the usage nicely on Restock and make people think twice about using something like Ghost or Overkill. Then when it comes to Hardline, this is actually the least used perk in Warzone for tier 2 at just 0.1%. It's actually the least used perk in the entire game of Warzone. And with this, I think there's a couple different options to improve it. The first option that I thought of is maybe if you have Hardline, you get 1 free buyback of a teammate, as well as the reduced prices at the buy stations that you already get. I think that would be a great little bonus. It would allow you to bring one of those teammates back, and also in a lot of situations where both you and your teammates die, but you respawn from the gulag and your teammate doesn't, this would give you that sort of choice to maybe select your Hardline loadout, which gives you that free buyback, so you can get your Hardline loadout, then you can go straight to buying back your teammate with your free buyback, and that's how you're effectively sacrificing that second perk. So instead of just choosing the same old Ghost class, you might think twice about that. Aside from that, another thing they could do to bump this up that's very simple is quite simply cut the cost even more. As it is now, I think it's a 20 or 25% reduction to prices of various items, not all of them. Why not just bump that right up to 40%? Like, really go big with this to the point where it really fills that role out nicely, because as it is now, nobody's using it, so it's clearly not enough currently, and I think something should be done to improve Hardline. As for the next one, this is High Alert, and High Alert, I am very surprised to see that only 0.6% of people are using it. That is way lower than I thought it would be, because High Alert is an excellent perk for Warzone, because it lets you know if somebody's looking at you. Even at really long distances, you'll know that as long as they're not using cold-blooded, and that's an incredibly valuable perk for Warzone. So I really think this is just a case of, once again, over-reliance on Ghost as well as Overkill, and that's probably the main reason you don't see High Alert used too often. But finally, this leaves us with Point Man, and with Point Man, all this does is it gives you and your teammates extra money for completing a contract. And this is one of those perks where, unless your specific strategy is to go around completing contracts as often as possible, there's just no reason to use Point Man. And even if you're doing that, you're still probably better off with the Ghost perk and just sucking it up and not getting that extra money. So Point Man's a bit of a tricky one, I feel, but a few improvements that maybe could be made is make it so Point Man boosts your ability to complete some of the contracts. It wouldn't work for all of them, but maybe with the most wanted contract, for instance, make it so the timer starts off at a lower value, so it doesn't take you as long to complete a most wanted contract. Or with a recon contract, for instance, if you're going to be standing in that area to capture the recon point, maybe make it so you can capture that recon point even faster than you currently can. I don't know, I think there's room for a little bit of improvement here or there with Point Man, but like I said, it's really a tricky one since it is such a niche perk. But that pretty much covers it for Tier 2. I honestly don't think we're going to be reducing too much reliance on Overkill and Ghost just because they're so valuable for a Battle Royale, and nothing can really compete properly with that. But now let's move into the Tier 3 set of perks. And with this one, we actually see our most used perk in Warzone, which is amped at 76%. And that's mainly for the ability to swap between weapons quickly, so it's often coupled with Overkill. But also in the Tier 3 perk, the least used perk is Tune-Up at 1.6%. So let's start going through this list, and let's kick it off with Tune-Up and what I would change with Tune-Up. And this one I'm actually a little bit excited about. The idea that I have for Tune-Up is it should still do what it does now, which allows you to revive teammates a little bit faster. But on top of that, why not make it work like Kill Chain, but instead of for kill streaks, it works for field upgrades. So if you have Tune-Up, it increases the odds of getting a field upgrade out of those loot boxes around the map. I think that'd be a great perk for people that really want to use stopping power as much as possible. For instance, if they're using Tune-Up, they're going to come across stopping power more often. Or Dead Silence, that's another huge one that I really like having when I'm pushing an enemy team. And it would be great to have a perk that allows that Dead Silence to be popping up more often throughout a match. Either that, or maybe they could even implement a system that allows you to carry 2 field upgrades at once, and it would work just like the Field Upgrade Pro that we have in multiplayer. So you can pick up 2 different field upgrades, and then when you go to activate the field upgrade, it prompts you to select which of the 2 field upgrades you want to use. That would also be great, although I don't know how easy that would be to implement into something like Warzone. It's just an idea I had that I think would make Tune-Up a much more attractive option. As for Shrapnel, this is the next one, and it's used 2.4% of the time, which I'm honestly surprised about. I don't see much reason to use Shrapnel, because by default, you can carry 2 lethals in this game, unlike multiplayer, which only allows you to carry 1 lethal unless you're using Shrapnel. So honestly, what I would do is I would make it the same way in Warzone, so you can only carry 1 lethal unless you're using Shrapnel. First up, I think that would reduce some of the spam of that lethal equipment, which I'm all for. And second, it would give you a bit more of a reason to use Shrapnel in the first place. Then after that, we have Battle Harden, which is only used 2.6% of the time, which again, I'm quite surprised to see. And with this, honestly, I wouldn't change anything about it. I think if Restock were to get that buff that I mentioned, then Battle Harden would become more attractive because you'd have more people running stuns. Also, if they nerf the heartbeat sensor, you would have more people running stuns and flashes. And therefore, as a result, people would be using Battle Harden much more often, and it would start to balance things out more. But after that, we have Spotter, which I'm very surprised that 4.4% of people use Spotter. I don't really think it's that great. Yes, it can help you find campers sometimes, but it's not all that great in Warzone. So the idea I had for Spotter that would go great with the theme of the perk is maybe make it so if you aim at an enemy for longer than 1 second, for instance, then it will automatically ping and mark that enemy for your teammates, so you don't have to do it manually. I don't think this is something that would be immediately overpowered by any means because it only takes you a moment to manually mark that enemy anyway. This would just make it a little bit easier. And I know I get into a lot of situations where I aim first and I could start shooting, but I want to make sure I mark the enemy before I start shooting so my teammates are on the same page as me. And having a perk like this would be awesome, so I don't have to think about marking that enemy. I can just get into the fight, and he will end up getting marked automatically. Now, I do feel like they would have to tune this timing very carefully, though. If they made it so you didn't have to aim at an enemy for very long to mark them, then I do potentially see some room for abuse, where people could just kind of like aim down sight and sort of scan around really quickly to mark enemies that they otherwise wouldn't have seen. So that's why I would say that you have to aim like on their hitbox for a full second or half a second or something like that in order for that marker to appear. But I think that would be an awesome boost for Spotter. And finally, this just leaves us with Tracker. And when it comes to Tracker, it's used 12.7% of the time, which is actually a really solid percentage. It's definitely the second most used tier 3 perk, and I think it's just fine as it is, but a suggestion I had for Tracker in multiplayer that I would also like to see in Warzone is make it so it delays the trigger of claymores and proximity mines. I think that would just give a nice little boost to Tracker on top of what it already does, and that'd be great in my opinion. But there we have it. Those are my suggestions for perk balance in Warzone based on what we now know is the usage of those perks. Of course, I'd like to know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about my ideas, and what other ideas do you have to help improve some of the perks that really aren't used all that often in Warzone? Just let me know those thoughts in the comment section down below. If you enjoyed the video, a like rating is always appreciated, and don't forget to subscribe for more if you haven't already. I'll talk to you guys next time.